Warning, the following video contains stories that may be harmful or traumatizing to some audiences. What's the most creepiest thing you've seen that you weren't supposed to see? While working in a level 1 trauma center, calibrating medical x-ray equipment, I was in the emergency room, hearing noises, voices, normal stuff. Anyway, I heard this kid crying, screaming at the top of his lungs. Sound like pretty powerful lungs, I was guessing a high school age? Everyone was moving fast as they normally do, however they had looks on their faces of deep concern. When one of the techs I knew well had a moment, I asked, guessing a kid fell out of his treehouse. The tech shook his head and claimed, "That's no kid in there. That's a full-grown man who was riding his motorcycle and came in, some assembly required." I couldn't resist. A 200-pound man at over 6 tall in black Harley-Davidson leather. He lost his arm above the elbow and one of his legs was twisted around completely backwards. A visual I will never get out of my head. That much blood, you can physically smell the iron in the air. That's what I get for looking. I saw a lady moving big blue chemical barrels into a garage. There was at least 20 in there and she saw me and closed her garage. Drove by an hour later, garage open, all barrels gone. Lol, this legit could be my mom. We use blue plastic shipping barrels to send her crap down south every year, basically anything non-perishable, furniture, books, car parts, makeup, etc. She lives in Canada 6 months of the year, in the Caribbean the other 6. We take them from the garage to the basement, fill them up, then take them to the shipping company a month or so before she flies down. Edit, to address repeated questions. Barrels are about 200 liters, 400 pounds. This is non-perishable stuff, but a lot of it is consumable, for example canned food, or things like furniture, car parts, etc. Termites eat a lot of furniture, where it's cheaper to buy in Canada and ship down. When I was growing up, my mom and dad were shopping for a new house. We went to a new construction neighborhood to take a look. There was a model that my mom liked and the sales lady said there was one being built down the street. It was about 50% done, but we can take a look to get an idea of the space. So we all hopped into the sales lady car and went to go look. We got in the house and she started to show us around. We went upstairs and in the second floor bedroom, there was a guy fully nude and furiously masturbating away. I am 100% sure he heard us coming as the house was empty and our voices were slightly echoing as we moved around. My mom screamed, the sales lady screamed, my dad said, "What the frick?" I was just hysterically laughing. The guy grabbed his clothing and just ran past us and out the house. I'm a sales rep and was looking for a meeting room in a rural hospital's pathology department and got lost. I started opening doors to find someone who could help me. When I opened one door, there was a primate of some sort, not human, that was suspended by its wrists that had all of its skin flayed off. Presumably it was a primate cadaver being used for anatomy lessons, but it scared the shit out of me. The skin was removed from the skull, but the eyeballs remained, so it appeared to be staring at me as I entered the room. Pathology departments in small-town hospitals are creepy as hell. I was driving to a Jimmy Buffett concert in Pennsylvania back in 2007 with my brother and 2 friends. We were just driving along and saw a 4-door sedan in the right-hand lane about half a mile in front of us swerving. Figured maybe they were going to the concert and pre-gamed a little too much. Anyway, my brother decides to pull up on them and see what we can see. As we are approaching, we see handfuls of papers being thrown out the passenger window. Confused, we speed up and are just about to pass them on the left. We see a couple in their 50s in the car. The husband, who is driving, is just throwing haymakers at his wife right to her face in the passenger seat as he's driving. Time feels like it stood still for a minute. We are driving alongside with me in the passenger seat, window rolled down, flailing my arms around and yelling, trying to get the guy's attention. Remind you, we are going 55 mph. Another car comes up behind us and we actually manage to block the dude in and slow him down. Meanwhile, my friend in the backseat is on the phone with 911 trying to get a cop out there. Long story short, we end up slowing the car down to a slow crawl and cops show up within what seemed like a minute. Cops took our statements and arrested the dude. It was a pretty quiet ride the rest of the way to the concert. I have been asked many times on here what a haymaker is. Imagine winding up with your arm and hitting something or someone as hard as you can. In this case, trigger warning, the man was driving and holding onto the wheel with his left hand, taking his right fist across his body to the left, almost touching the driver's side window with his fist and swinging it across his body towards the passenger seat headrest from 9 to 3 on a clock. However, in a car you are mostly at the same height and this poor lady's face was taking all the contact. When I was 15, me and a buddy were hiking along the Merced River to our fishing spot when we were stopped on the path by 3 guys with ball caps and bandanas covering their faces and holding shotguns. They told us to turn around and go back, which we did without question. Was very strange since we'd been down there dozens of times and had never seen them before or after this. Found out a few months after that there was a clampers rally happening on the property of a guy who lived down there and there were guards. When I was a kid, I was walking to my house in Atlanta, from my school. And between two buildings there were about 3 gang members beating the crap out of this guy. The guy was on the ground with blood around his head. One of the gang members saw me and walked over to me. He was wearing an orange ski mask, which he pulled off. He got on one knee so he was on my level. This massive black guy stares me straight in the eyes and says, "This is a bad guy, we're teaching him a lesson, okay?" I nodded very fast, I was so scared. He smiled at me and said, "Don't tell anyone you saw, okay? This is our secret." I nodded again. "Go home now, okay?" I nodded and took off running. I ran all the way home and just sat on my porch shaking. I realize now that the fact he took off his mask was to make me feel less scared, but if he was a different person, he could have taken off his mask because he didn't care if I saw his face because he was going to kill me. A few years ago I still lived in my parents' house. It was about 11 p.m. and our dog started barking viciously. The dog is only able to move around in the backyard, and normally he would bark at cats in the front yard, but something about his bark was different, so I walked to the window to see what was going on. I looked out and saw a man looking through the same window. We both froze and after a few seconds he ran off. A few weeks later when we came home after work all our electronics and expensive stuff was gone. Man, I live in pretty rural Russia and like everybody else in the neighborhood we had a guard dog. It got poisoned, died. A couple weeks later one night I hear a car pulling into our driveway and right in front of our house. My room had a window facing the road and the rear were no lights turned on. I just peeked at them for what felt like an hour but was probably just 5 minutes, decided to shine my phone's flashlight on them and they instantly drove away. Scary as shit. I was backpacking on the trail staying in one of the multi-story shelters, basically a barn. A little background is these shelters are notoriously overrun by rodents, so you need to store food hygiene stuff in a tree. You share the barn with like 5 to 10 strangers and it's usually a fun way to make new friends. Anyway, I was up in the loft and woke up to a thudding noise. I thought I imagined it but it happened again every 2 to 4 minutes. I peek my head down the ladder and there is a dude sitting there super still with a red light headlamp pointed down at some peanut butter crackers. A rat goes to get some cracker and he slams a knife into it and piles it onto a stack of dead rodents. I was creeped TF out but the dude turned out to be chill and made everyone coffee the next morning. He totaled 13-ish rats. We had a funeral pyre with him. Walked in on my gym teacher with his PP out. In his office alone. In the 7th grade. What is it with middle school teachers? We had one science teacher whose contract was non-renewed because he would leave the students to run ourselves and go meet his boyfriend in the parking lot for things. We know this because once he actually parked in the lot outside of the classroom, which had big windows and you could see everything going on about 10 feet away. Another one was ridiculous enough. His desk was angled away in the back corner of the room and while we did assignments he would sit back there and watch porn and touch himself. Got caught, and fired, after a student turned him in and they found all of the history on his PC. I saw a pimp shooting up a hooker in a car then pushing her out into the street in Washington, D.C. Do you mean shooting up like bullets, or like heroin? Heroin I assume. Had to go to a co-worker's apartment to retrieve office equipment and files, because he had died suddenly of a heart attack the night before. When I got there he was still in his recliner, the funeral home hadn't picked him up yet. I was not a happy puppy that day. Post-edit for clarity, this happened in late afternoon. The office management had contacted the apartment management where he lived when there was no contact from him. Co-worker was always early to arrive. Superintendent went to check, heard TV, no answer so used his key, early 1990s when you could still do that. I was at my friend's house and we were playing on her dad's computer. Somehow we ended up in the search history and he'd been to porn sites about bestiality. I was like 12 and I've never been the same. When I was little me and my family lived over 20 kilometers from a city in the woods. We had a nanny stay with us when our parents were away. Once when only me, my sister we were around 8 years old, and nanny were home while playing outside we saw a bunch of people emerge from the forest nearby and walk slowly like zombies towards our house. They tried climbing the fence, but they were too out of it to accomplish such a task. The nanny called our mom and she drove home from the city and took us all to our grandparents. We later found out that there was some drug-infused party going on not too far from our home and 2 people died from overdosing, one from stab wounds there. To this day I feel super grateful that they were too tired or drugged out to get past our fence that day and police was able to apprehend the ones that stayed around long enough. My uncle was babysitting me when I was about 9 and so I went to work with him for the day. He was a landlord for some buildings in a city at the time and got complaints that an elderly woman hadn't been seen in a few days from the neighbors. She was on the ground floor and I think the door may have been locked from the inside with a chain or something but he had me climb in through the window to open the front door for him. My naturally curious self crawled through the window and instead of going straight for the front door I followed an awful smell towards the bedroom and found this lady face up on the ground dead. The place was a mess so I didn't immediately associate the bad smell with death but I bolted to the front door and watched them take her away in the ambulance. I don't know any legal answers here and I never really talked about it. Weird day. I was sitting in the backseat on a bus and saw a man jerk off to a woman who was sitting a few spots in front of him. It was real nasty. He just in an empty cup and threw it away in the small trash can in the bus. I was 14 at the time. I didn't see it so much as heard it. I was the first appointment of the morning at my dermatologist's office and was sitting in the corner out of view of the receptionist's desk. The doctor came up to her behind the counter and started reaming her out, cussing etc. about some situation I couldn't understand, but he was actually yelling and super nasty. Then not 10 seconds later, he opens the door and comes out doing a jig and whistling and all do-dee-do-dee-do. "Aw shucks, good morning Miss Annabelle." Do-dee-do-dee-do. Like he usually did. I had whiplash from the 180. I stopped seeing him because the transformation was seriously scary. A few years ago the wife and I were searching for our first home. I was in the basement of one of the places that we were looking at, and somehow noticed a light switch that seemed out of place. I was flicking the switch as my wife and agent came down the stairs. My agent noticed a bit of light come from underneath the drywall framing the stairs. With a little further inspection I found a very tiny passage between the foundation wall and the back side of the stairs. Said passage opened up into an undisclosed renovation that was a sub-basement room, that was completely rubberized with an industrial hose and shower head. Walls, ceilings and flooring was all rubber. It was 100% a secret murder room. My agent called the cops and 48 hours later the listing was removed and the home had police tape around it. A classmate of mine was sitting weirdly and covered his crotch with his coat. He's acting weird, so I asked him if he's okay, and it turned out that he was jerking during the math class. Not sure whether it's hilarious or creepy, a little bit of both maybe. His awkward smile is both disturbing and funny. A drunk idiot got hit by a car right in front of me in the middle of the night in the middle of freaking nowhere. His condition was unstable. The trauma helicopter, with trauma team OFC, was needed. I was holding a sheet with another person so onlookers wouldn't see what was happening and well. It wasn't pretty at all. Ever heard ribs crack due to CPR? And his lung collapsed or it was filling with blood, not sure, but the trauma doctor opened up his chest right in front of me. I do not have any medical background and well, I've seen things that night that I wasn't supposed to. But it did give me more appreciation seeing those professionals in action basically performing surgery right in front of me. Was rather impressed by how methodical they were in their cool-headedness. I came home unannounced when I was in college and walked in on my parents fricking. He was really going to town on her, such that they didn't even notice. I tiptoed back out. That's funny, I had the same thing happen to me. But it was on vacation when I was 13 and my brother was 15. We both had friends with us and we came back home in the afternoon to see my parents on the couch in our family room. Devastating, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the conversation my parents had with us after. Never was able to shake that tragic memory. Driving a friend and his family to airport, he is an doc and I am not. We watch a trail of motorcyclists, who group of them out for a ride. Anyhow one of the guys goes up, hits the side of a truck and then cracks his head wide open. At highway acceleration speeds and goes end over end with no upper part of his skull. Two other motorcyclists stand there with sheet or something to block view. Hard to miss the reddish pink brain stain on the highway. My phone's photos synced up with my mom's and I had found stuff meant for my data will never be the same. I worked at a hospital when I was younger. Food service, delivering food trays to the patients. I walked into one of the psych rooms unknowingly. There was a crazy lady sitting in a chair holding a bedpan full of feces, and let me tell you, when I say crazy, this woman had a look in her eye that I haven't ever seen and don't ever want to see again. She said, "If you don't get out of my dwelling, I'm gonna throw shit on you." Little boy, I've never been so freaked out in my life. Needless to say I dropped the damn tray and ran out. It's creepy to me but not all that creepy on the whole, but on 2 different occasions I've helped my dad with his iPad and found very specific types of porn in open windows because he doesn't feel the need to close them apparently. This old lady in Lower Manhattan pushing a shopping cart full of cans and bottles stops in front of me and my friends and pulls down her pants and begins pooping on the sidewalk. On my way home, I was looking at a busy street from the subway platform I was on and I saw this guy that everyone knew as a scammer in the neighborhood. He'd throw himself in front of cars for money. But that day he threw himself in front of a real nice car and it struck him real hard. He flew into the 4-way intersection, clearly shocked by the pain, and his head got crushed under a truck passing by that didn't slow down in time. It looked like a watermelon exploding. It's crazy seeing a full-on human who has existed for decades just stop existing in a few seconds. I was just jogging one morning when my leg starts to hurt, so I decide to turn back and take shortcut. It's this abandoned factory area, faster to go through than go around. Just when I'm about to go into area from the fence hole, I hear weird noises coming from that direction. So I stop and try to look what is going on there, which probably was pretty lucky for me. There is 2 homeless guys sucking the Mario mushrooms of each other's. You figure out the details. And then there is a third guy filming it and doing the monkey smashing with the hand he's also holding a gun. You become pretty great at sneaking away when you don't want to be part of some weird tool triangle. And the leg pain. What leg pain? I worked for defense lawyers and they represented a very high-profile, prolific serial killer in our area. We once got a ton of boxes back from storage so they could look for something. I looked in a box labeled pictures and once I started looking I couldn't stop. I swear I didn't sleep for a week. I ended up coming home early from a party. My brother thought I was crashing somewhere else. I entered the house very quietly because I didn't want to wake him up. Walked in on him masturbating using a flashlight to a picture of a celebrity while he was recording a video doing a cum tribute. I pretended not to notice but he saw me and yelled at me because I wasn't supposed to be home. Also something like it's not what it looks like. Dad thought I was asleep and our only computer at the house was at my room. Woke up in the middle of night to see titties on my computer and didn't understanding what's going on. Or the time when he was suicidal and hanged a rope on the top of his room which I saw when I went to the bathroom. All this shit happened before I was 11 and didn't get better from here. Watched a gangland show, saw an interesting tattoo and the location that would identify someone as having been in a particular gang and served time, thought nothing of it. Literally the next Monday, I'm offloading equipment for a job and as I pass a piece of gear to one of the new freelancers I see the exact tattoo in the exact place in the show. He sees me recognize what it is and for a very short very chill moment we pause. Then I grab the next piece of gear and decide to stop watching gangland shows. If you enjoyed the video consider giving it a like, thank you.